So in this video I'm just going to give a story of a patient describing the context of a pain and how some of the cues when they appear again, no matter how many years down the line it is, can still trigger that pain. It's a fascinating insight, and we've all got similar stories and memories of pain, and certain things will remind us of them. So watch this video to understand a little bit more, to understand the power of the cues that can trigger pain long after the event even happened. In this video I'm just going to tell you a story about a patient describing a pain that they'd experienced, I think it was over 30 years ago, and they weren't coming for that particular problem. We're just describing contexts of pain and cues once we start discussing what can influence pain. When you think of any pain you've experienced in your life, there's a collection of things present in the moment you feel the pain. There's a certain time of the day, there's a situation you're in, there's a chair you're sitting in, there's a match you're playing the football in, there's a person you're with, there's smells, there's all the senses that get encoded. Everything you can pick up in that moment gets encoded by the brain. So I'll give you the example. It's one of my patients recently said that they recalled an injury to their ankle. Now this ankle injury was 25 plus years ago, and I might not recall the detail exactly, but it won't be far off. It was a group of guys in break time just having a game of basketball, and they'd set up in this yard or this warehouse a few pallets, and you know those old oil drum kind of bins, they'd put one on either end as a basketball court as far as I could understand, and he told me the time of year it was, he told me he knows exactly who he was with, he described the pallets, he did the arm movements of setting up the goals, hoops or whatever you're going to shoot the ball into, and then he described as he ran to kind of dunk or hit a shot, he landed on the outside of his foot. And we've all had that sensation going on your ankle, and he thought he'd broke his ankle. It was a really severe pain, immediately acute. He went to the hospital. It wasn't broken, fortunately, but he'd torn the ligaments. So that's the memory that he had, and all those things are linked to it. And I'm describing what I remembered from that. Now, this was over 25 years. He thinks it's maybe 30 years. So it's a long time ago, and yet he could clearly remember everything around it, fully healed, no ongoing problems. But what he said was that if he watches or sees on television, sometimes you see the movies of a woman, normally a woman, walking in high heels, not always nowadays, but that's okay, walking down the street, and they rock as if they're going to go over their ankle. He says, if I see that, he said, I get a little sharp pain in my ankle. He said, sometimes if I see it, I have to look away, and then that stops the sensation. So after all that time, as soon as his brain sees something similar to something that was extremely painful, from which he's completely recovered from now, it triggers that neural pathway and he feels the pain. It's amazing when you think of it like that. But if you look at two pain pathways that you might have, pick one that never troubled you since, and it might be a scar, it might be you broke your leg in a playground as a kid, it might be a pain that you no longer get, but you could recall the event. And you'll know the day, the time, the place, roughly. You might know the town it was in, you might know who was with you, the weather conditions. You'd be able to reel them all off, and if I said to you, does it hurt you now? You say, well, no. And is there any stress attached to that? You say, well, there was then, but no, not now. I'm okay. I've recovered. I was fine. You recall that so you know what to do in the future if it happened again, and how to protect yourself from it happening again. And who you need to see, if you need to see anyone, or do you have the resilience from that experience to think, yeah, I'll be okay to deal with it myself. That's the reason you encode pain. So if you see any of those circumstances again, it can warn you to take the appropriate action not to suffer the injury. Now take a pain you experience. Pick one of them if you've got loads. Pick one, a back pain, a neck pain, a shoulder pain, and look at the circumstances present in your life then. If it's a physical injury, the tissue healed within 3 months. Okay. But look at the other circumstances. Who was in your life at the time? How were you feeling when you felt that pain? What else was going on in your life at that time? What's the weather like? What was the job you had? What relationships you were in? How were you caring for people? Were you isolated from people? Was it traumatic? Or was it a collection of things happening that you gradually felt pain? If it's blurry to you and there was no actual trauma, then it's sometimes hard to think, where did my pain come from? And that means it wasn't from physical trauma in the moment, but there was probably a collection of things happening at the time. It means that they're probably the drivers for your pain now, even though they're all finished. Historically, it's past. You can't go back to that point. But if the same kind of emotions are in your life, the same kinds of people are in your life, the same kind of physical sense of overload or responsibility or fears or frustrations, if they appear just like it was Martin, I'll tag him in this video, he can correct if I've got it wrong, the history of his pain, but if Martin saw that picture and his ankle pain went, can you see how if you get frustrated or fearful or the work conditions are the same or the time of the year comes again, it can trigger the same pain. Now that pain will feel exactly the same as when it started, depending on the emotional intensity present. So Martin's is a tiny little flick. You can take his visual cues away by not looking at the screen and the pain subsides. But imagine if you kept playing over the image of that. Imagine if you kept watching, kept looking, you kept feeling. That drives that physical response to the point where it keeps firing over and over and over, and you eventually automate it. So take these two pains, and one that never troubles you again and one that keeps troubling you. You'll find it's the cues present around it, and it's the emotion connecting all those cues together that drives it on. And unpicking that is finding the emotion behind it, and maybe a belief behind the emotion. And sometimes you can do that on your own. Sometimes you can work it out. Sometimes they're invisible. And the pain protects you from feeling the emotion. It's crazy when you think about it like that. But pain only protects you from more pain. And sometimes it's safe to keep that pain. But if you are prepared to take the steps to explore what's behind pain, the beliefs, the emotions, the other cues, or even you just decide to react differently to these cues that trigger pain, then you can be free from persistent pain. It isn't easy, and you might need somebody else to work with. It doesn't have to be me. Find someone to connect with who understands these principles, but it's certainly worth the effort. And the effort, just start tiny. Be kind to yourself. Do it in a small way and make a habit of it, and you can be free from persistent pain.